Kirstie Alley not returning to Star Trek meant another character turned traitor in the last original series movie. When Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country premiered in 1991, it served as a bittersweet farewell to the original crew of the USS Enterprise. The movie was designed as both a rousing political thriller and a ceremonial send-off for William Shatner's Captain Kirk, Leonard Nimoy's Spock, and the rest of the beloved ensemble. But hidden within its Cold War allegory of interstellar diplomacy was a betrayal that nearly shattered the crew from within. Originally, that act of treachery might have played out very differently if Kirstie Alley had reprised her iconic role as Saavik. Instead, the traitor mantle passed to another Vulcan, Lieutenant Valeries, played by Kim Cattrall. That single casting change altered the film's emotional stakes, character dynamics, and ultimately the way audiences remember Star Trek VI. Looking back, the decision not to bring Alley back transformed the film into something both unexpected and deeply controversial. Saavik, a character built for betrayal, introduced in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Saavik was meant to carry the mantle of Starfleet's next generation. Played by a then-rising Kirstie Alley, Saavik was young, brilliant, and positioned as Spock's protege. She embodied the Vulcan ideals of logic, but also carried a human edge of vulnerability and ambition. Alley Saavik was both likable and enigmatic, perfect qualities for a character who might later reveal hidden allegiances. By the time Star Trek VI rolled around, Nicholas Meyer and the creative team imagined her betraying Kirk and Spock during the assassination conspiracy against Chancellor Gorkin. The idea was narratively elegant, a character the audience had trusted for years turning out to have sided with Starfleet hardliners who wanted to prevent peace with the Klingons. It would have been shocking but also understandable. Saavik had endured Khan's wrath, the Genesis catastrophe, and Spock's death and rebirth. Her perspective on loyalty, ethics, and Federation politics could have been deeply complicated. In a sense, she was made for that twist. But Kirstie Alley was not available or willing to return. She had already turned down reprising Saavik in Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, due to contract disputes and concerns about being typecast. When The Undiscovered Country began development nearly a decade later, Alley had long since moved on to a flourishing career in television and comedy. With her absence, Saavik was off the table. Enter Valeries, the replacement traitor. Faced with the need for a betrayer within Kirk's circle, the filmmakers created Valeries, a new Vulcan played by Kim Cattrall. She was positioned as Spock's latest protege, filling the same narrative role Saavik once had. Valeris's betrayal still carried weight. She sabotaged the Klingon Federation peace talks, exposed the Enterprise crew to deadly danger, and forced Spock to perform a mind-meld interrogation in one of the movie's most harrowing scenes. But because Valeries was a brand new character, her treachery lacked the devastating punch it could have had with Saavik. Audiences simply didn't have years of emotional investment in Valeries. She wasn't the cadet we'd watch grow into a trusted officer. She wasn't someone who had earned Kirk and Spock's loyalty through shared battles and tragedies. Instead, she was introduced and unmasked as a conspirator within the same film. Her arc worked as a storytelling device, but it didn't quite cut as deep as the filmmakers had originally intended. Why the switch still worked. Despite the lost potential, Star Trek VI remains one of the franchise's most beloved films. The introduction of Valeries allowed the movie to tell a story that was both politically sharp and emotionally grounded. Kim Cattrall brought a different energy to the role than Alley likely would have, playing Valeries with icy logic and understated ambition, rather than the quiet vulnerability Alley gave Saavik. This shift framed Valeries less as a tragic turncoat and more as a chilling embodiment of Federation hypocrisy. Her betrayal wasn't just personal, it was systemic. She represented the younger generation of Starfleet officers who had internalized prejudice against the Klingons, showing that the problem of mistrust wasn't limited to aging admirals or bitter war veterans like Kirk. It was embedded within the institution itself. In that sense, the betrayal carried broader thematic weight. Valeries wasn't a character we'd grown with for years, but she was a symbol of the dangers of intolerance persisting across generations. The ripple effect of Saavik's absence had Alley or even Robin Curtis, who later played Saavik in Star Trek III and Star Trek IV, return for The Undiscovered Country, the film's emotional center would have shifted dramatically. Imagine Spock's anguish in the interrogation scene if the betrayer were not a new student but his original protege. Imagine Kirk confronting the realization that the young officer he had once seen as a daughter-like figure now stood against him. It would have added layers of personal tragedy on top of the political story, reinforcing one of Star Trek's most powerful themes, the struggle between idealism and disillusionment. Instead, the choice to use Valerie's gave the film a different, sharper edge. It focused less on personal betrayal and more on the institutional rot within Starfleet. Both approaches work, but they leave very different impressions. Savic's betrayal would have broken hearts. Valeris's betrayal rattled faith in the Federation itself. Behind-the-scenes realities, part of the reason the filmmakers pivoted away from Savic was pragmatic. Bringing back Kirstie Alley was unlikely, and Robin Curtis had never been as warmly embraced by fans. Moreover, some creative voices, reportedly including Leonard Nimoy, felt uneasy about tarnishing Savic's reputation. She had been an enduring symbol of the new generation, and making her a villain might have permanently soured fans on the character. By introducing Valerie's, the filmmakers got the best of both worlds. They preserved Savic's legacy while still delivering the gut punch of a Vulcan traitor. And casting Kim Cattrall, who was already a recognizable star by the early 90s, gave the movie a fresh injection of talent. Cattrall herself approached the role with an inventive spirit. She famously pitched the idea of Valerie's having an undercurrent of sexuality and individuality, styling her Vulcan hair in a way that differentiated her from the traditional mold. Though some of her bolder ideas were toned down, her performance added dimension to what could have been a simple archetype. A what-if scenario. Still, it's hard not to imagine the what-if of Savic's betrayal. If Alley had returned, the undiscovered country might have been remembered as even more emotionally devastating than it already is. Spock's mind meld would have been a gut-wrenching violation of someone he had loved like family. Kirk's struggle to trust his officers in his final mission would have carried even greater weight. Perhaps most intriguingly, Savic's betrayal might have reframed her entire arc across the films. Was she always leaning toward disillusionment? Did her experiences with the Genesis Project and Spock's death plant the seeds of radicalism? That retroactive reinterpretation would have added rich complexity to earlier films, making her one of the franchise's most layered characters. The legacy of Valerie's. Instead, we have Valerie's, a character who, despite being created for a single movie, left her mark. Her betrayal set up one of the most unforgettable scenes in Star Trek VI, Spock's cold fury as he mind melds,